In the far reaches of the galaxy, whispered in hushed tones across 1,000 worlds, there was a name that struck fear into the hearts of even the most formidable beings, Zorgax. Known as the deadliest assassin in the cosmos, Zorgax's reputation preceded him like a dark shadow, a harbinger of inescapable doom for those unfortunate enough to become his targets. Zorgax was a master of his craft, honing his skills over centuries of deadly missions. His species, the Zorgans, were renowned for their cunning, agility, and ruthless efficiency, traits that Zorgax embodied to their ultimate extremes. He moved like liquid shadow, striking with devastating precision before vanishing without a trace. No security system could keep him out, no bodyguards could protect against him, no plea for mercy could sway him from completing his contracts. His appearance was as terrifying as his reputation, a nightmarish fusion of organic and cybernetic components. Jet-black scales covered his sinewy frame, contrasting with the gleaming metal of his enhanced limbs and sensory implants. His eyes, a piercing crimson, seemed to burn with an intensity that could melt through the strongest of wills. When Zorgax was on the hunt, it was said that even the void of space itself trembled in his presence. As he sat in the dimly lit control room of his state-of-the-art stealth ship, Zorgax reviewed the details of his latest contract. A holographic display shimmered before him, painting the angular contours of his face in an eerie blue glow. The target was a human, an ambassador of the fledgling Terran Federation who had become a thorn in the side of some very powerful galactic figures. Normally, Zorgax wouldn't bother with such seemingly insignificant prey, but the exorbitant bounty attached to this particular human had piqued his interest. Earth, a primitive, backwater planet on the fringes of known space. Its inhabitants, the humans, were a relatively new addition to the galactic stage. Most advanced species regarded them as little more than curiosities, barely evolved primates fumbling their way into a universe far beyond their comprehension. But Zorgax knew better than to underestimate any potential target, no matter how unassuming they might appear. He leaned back in his command chair, a throne of sleek black metal and pulsing energy conduits. Long, taloned fingers steepled before him as he contemplated the challenge ahead. Eliminating a human would be child's play, a trivial exercise hardly worthy of his unparalleled skills. Yet something about this contract felt different, a nagging sensation that tugged at the edges of his genetically enhanced intuition. No matter. He was Zorgax, the galaxy's apex predator, the inescapable hand of death itself. No mere human could possibly pose a threat to him. With a thought, he activated his ship's quantum drive, feeling the hum of raw power surging through the vessel's superstructure. The stars outside the viewport stretched into shimmering lines as the craft accelerated to unfathomable speeds, hurtling through the cosmic void towards the insignificant blue marble called Earth. As the ship tore across light years, Zorgax allowed himself a rare moment of anticipation, a predatory thrill that raced along his enhanced synapses. Soon, the human ambassador would be nothing more than another notch on his already extensive kill tally, and the galaxy would once again tremble at the mere whisper of his name. Little did Zorgax know, as he sped towards his destination with unwavering confidence, that this mission would prove to be anything but routine. On the distant, unassuming world of Earth, a human target awaited, one who would come to challenge everything the legendary assassin thought he knew about the universe and his place within it. As Zorgax's ship hurtled through the swirling vortex of hyperspace, the assassin used the time to further study his target. The human ambassador's file was surprisingly scant, offering only the most basic information about his identity and role within the Terran Federation. Jackson Maverick, age 37, born on the human colony of New Eden. A rising star in Earth's diplomatic corps, known for his sharp wit, unorthodox tactics, and a frustrating tendency to defy the established norms of galactic politics. Zorgax scoffed at the notion that a human of all species could navigate the treacherous waters of interstellar diplomacy with any degree of success. In his experience, humans were little more than impulsive, irrational creatures, driven by their base emotions and woefully unprepared for the realities of a galaxy that cared little for their naive idealism. Ambassador Maverick would soon learn the folly of his arrogance, and Zorgax would be the one to teach him that final, fatal lesson. The assassin's musings were interrupted by the chime of the ship's proximity alert. Earth loomed ahead, a shimmering blue-green orb suspended against the infinite blackness of space. Zorgax's enhanced eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of the human homeworld, a planet that had long been beneath his notice. He had eliminated targets on countless worlds, from the scorching deserts of XAR to the frozen wastes of Cryos Prime, but never before had he set foot on this unremarkable backwater. As the ship slipped into Earth's atmosphere, Zorgax activated its cloaking systems, rendering the vessel invisible to the primitive detection technology employed by the planet's inhabitants. He guided the craft towards the sprawling megacity of New York, the hub of Earth's diplomatic activity and the location of Ambassador Maverick's current residence. The city's towering skyscrapers glittered in the sunlight, a testament to humanity's ambitious, but ultimately futile attempts to assert their dominance over their environment. Zorgax selected a secluded landing site on the outskirts of the city, a derelict industrial complex long abandoned by its human occupants. As the ship touched down with barely a whisper, the assassin rose from his command chair, his movements fluid and precise. He donned his signature armor, a sleek, form-fitting suit of advanced polymers and nanofibers that enhanced his already formidable attributes to superhuman levels. With a thought, he activated the armor's mimetic properties, watching as its surface shimmered and shifted to match the dull grays and rusted browns of his surroundings. Satisfied that he would be all but invisible to prying eyes, Zorgax stepped out of his ship and into the harsh, unfiltered sunlight of Earth. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, a cloying mix of industrial pollutants and organic decay that would have sent a lesser being reeling. But Zorgax was no ordinary being. His enhanced senses filtered out the noise and the stench, focusing instead on the task at hand. He had already uploaded the ambassador's itinerary to his neural implants, and he knew that Maverick was scheduled to attend a diplomatic function at the United Nations headquarters that very evening. It was there that Zorgax would strike, a silent and swift execution that would send shockwaves through the galactic community. As he made his way towards the heart of the city, Zorgax couldn't help but feel a sense of disdain for the chaotic, disorganized nature of human society. The streets were choked with primitive ground vehicles, their engines sputtering and belching noxious fumes into the air. Throngs of humans milled about on the sidewalks, their faces etched with a mix of weariness and desperation that spoke to the fundamental emptiness of their existence. But amidst the sea of unremarkable faces, one stood out. A man, tall and lean, with piercing blue eyes and an air of quiet confidence that set him apart from the masses. Zorgax's implants immediately identified him as Jackson Maverick, the target he had come so far to eliminate. The assassin's lips curled into a predatory smile as he began to close in on his unsuspecting prey. Little did he know that this particular human would prove to be far more than a mere target, and that the events of the coming days would test the very limits of Zorgax's legendary skills and unshakable resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of vibrant orange and deep purple, Zorgax made his way towards the United Nations headquarters. The towering skyscraper, a gleaming beacon of human achievement and cooperation, stood in stark contrast to the assassin's dark purpose. He slipped through the crowds of diplomats and dignitaries with ease, his mimetic armor rendering him all but invisible to their untrained eyes. Zorgax had timed his approach perfectly, arriving just as Ambassador Maverick was set to deliver a keynote address to the assembled galactic representatives. The assassin took up a position in the shadows of the grand auditorium, his enhanced senses locked onto the human diplomat as he strode confidently towards the podium. Maverick was a striking figure, his tailored suit accentuating his lean, athletic frame, and his chiseled features exuding an air of charisma and intelligence. As the ambassador began to speak, his rich baritone voice filling the room, Zorgax readied his weapon. It was a compact, high-energy plasma pistol, capable of disintegrating a target at the molecular level without leaving a trace. The assassin had used it countless times before, and he had no doubt that it would serve him just as well in this instance. He took aim, his finger resting lightly on the trigger, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But just as he was about to squeeze the trigger, something unexpected happened. Ambassador Maverick, in the midst of his impassioned speech about the importance of galactic unity and cooperation, suddenly paused. His piercing blue eyes, which had been scanning the room, locked onto Zorgax's position with uncanny precision. For a moment, the two beings stared at each other across the vast expanse of the auditorium, a silent battle of wills playing out between them. Then, incredibly, Maverick smiled. It was a knowing, almost mischievous grin, as if he had been expecting Zorgax all along. With a slight nod of his head, the ambassador resumed his speech, never missing a beat. Zorgax, for perhaps the first time in his long and bloody career, hesitated. How could this human have spotted him? His cloaking technology was flawless, his approach impeccable. And yet, somehow, Maverick had seen through it all. The assassin's hesitation cost him dearly. In the split second that he paused, a team of highly trained security personnel, who had apparently been alerted to his presence, burst into the auditorium. They moved with a speed and precision that belied their human limitations, their weapons trained on Zorgax's position. The assassin, caught off guard, had no choice but to flee, his mission unfulfilled. As he raced through the labyrinthine corridors of the UN building, Zorgax's mind raced with questions. How had Maverick known he was there? What other surprises did this infuriating human have in store? For the first time in his long and illustrious career, the legendary assassin found himself doubting his own abilities. He had underestimated his target, a mistake that he knew could prove fatal in his line of work. Zorgax managed to escape the building unscathed, but his pride had taken a serious blow. As he made his way back to his hidden ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just brushed up against something far greater than himself. Ambassador Maverick, with his uncanny intuition and unflappable composure, represented a new kind of challenge, one that Zorgax had never encountered before. But the assassin was not one to back down from a challenge. If anything, his failure only served to stoke the flames of his determination. He would study his target more closely, learn his weaknesses, and exploit them without mercy. Jackson Maverick might have won this round, but the game was far from over. As he sat in the cockpit of his ship, reviewing the day's events with a critical eye, Zorgax made a solemn vow. He would not rest until the human ambassador was dead, his mission complete. And he would do whatever it took to make that happen, even if it meant pushing himself to the very limits of his legendary skills and abilities. For he was Zorgax, the galaxy's most feared assassin, and he would not be bested by a mere human. Not now, not ever. In the days that followed his initial failed attempt, Zorgax threw himself into the task of studying his elusive target. He pored over every scrap of information he could find about Ambassador Maverick, from his childhood on the colony world of New Eden to his meteoric rise through the ranks of the Terran diplomatic corps. The more he learned, the more he realized that this was no ordinary human. Maverick's intelligence and cunning were the stuff of legend, even among his own people. He had a way of seeing through the deceptions and machinations of even the most skilled diplomats, a talent that had earned him both admirers and enemies in equal measure. His unorthodox methods, which often involved taking great personal risks and relying on his own intuition rather than established protocols, had allowed him to achieve the impossible time and time again. But Zorgax was not intimidated by his target's reputation. If anything, it only served to heighten his sense of anticipation, the thrill of the hunt that had driven him to become the galaxy's premier assassin. He would match wits with this human, test his own legendary skills against Maverick's uncanny abilities. And in the end, he would emerge victorious, as he always had. The assassin began to plan his next move with meticulous care. He would strike at Maverick when he least expected it, using all of the advanced technology and deadly skills at his disposal. But even as he laid his trap, he couldn't shake the feeling that the ambassador was somehow one step ahead of him, anticipating his every move with an almost preternatural ability. The first attempt came at a diplomatic reception, a lavish affair attended by dignitaries from across the galaxy. Zorgax had infiltrated the event disguised as a member of the catering staff, his mimetic armor allowing him to blend in seamlessly with the other workers. He bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, his eyes never leaving the tall, charismatic figure of Ambassador Maverick as he worked the room with effortless grace. But just as Zorgax was about to make his move, Maverick turned to face him, his blue eyes locking onto the assassins with an intensity that seemed to pierce through his disguise. The ambassador smiled, a knowing, almost playful expression that sent a chill down Zorgax's spine. "You know," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial, "you really ought to try the canapés. They're simply divine." With that, Maverick turned and walked away, leaving Zorgax standing there, stunned and disbelieving. How had the human known? Had he really just been toying with him, playing some sort of elaborate game? The assassin's blood boiled at the thought, his pride demanding that he put an end to this infuriating human once and for all. But Maverick's elusiveness only seemed to grow with each passing attempt. At a private meeting with a group of high-ranking diplomats, Zorgax nearly had him in his sights, only to watch in disbelief as the ambassador somehow managed to slip away at the last moment, leaving behind a room full of confused and angry officials. At a public speech in front of a massive crowd, the assassin's carefully placed explosives failed to detonate, leaving him to wonder if Maverick had somehow managed to disarm them without anyone noticing. As the days turned into weeks, Zorgax found himself growing increasingly frustrated and obsessed. He had never encountered a target like Maverick before, someone who seemed to anticipate his every move and thwart his every effort with an almost casual ease. The assassin's confidence began to waver, replaced by a gnawing sense of doubt and uncertainty. But even as he grappled with his own growing sense of inadequacy, Zorgax couldn't help but feel a grudging sense of respect for his adversary. Maverick was a worthy opponent, a human who had somehow managed to earn the fear and admiration of even the most legendary assassin in the galaxy. And as much as it pained him to admit it, Zorgax knew that he would have to dig deeper, push himself harder than he ever had before, if he hoped to emerge victorious in this game of wits. For now, the hunt would continue, a deadly dance between two masters of their craft, each driven by their own sense of pride and determination. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the galaxy, Ambassador Jackson Maverick waited, ready to match wits with the legendary Zorgax once again. As the frustrating game of cat and mouse continued, Zorgax found himself questioning everything he had ever known about his own abilities and place in the universe. He had always prided himself on being the best of the best, the ultimate predator in a galaxy full of dangerous creatures and cunning adversaries. But now, faced with a mere human who seemed to defy all of his expectations and abilities, he couldn't help but wonder if he had been living a lie all along. The assassin's doubts only grew with each failed attempt to eliminate Ambassador Maverick. He tried every trick in his arsenal, every advanced weapon and cutting-edge technology at his disposal, but nothing seemed to work. Maverick was always one step ahead, anticipating his moves with an almost supernatural ability that left Zorgax feeling like a rank amateur. As he sat in his ship, brooding over his latest failure, Zorgax couldn't help but reflect on his long and storied career. He had killed countless targets over the years, from the lowliest of street thugs to the most powerful of galactic leaders. He had faced down armies and entire fleets, emerged victorious from battles that would have left lesser beings quaking in terror. But now, faced with a single, infuriating human, he found himself doubting everything he had ever achieved. Was he really the galaxy's greatest assassin, or had he simply been lucky all these years? Had his success been due to his own skill and cunning, or had he simply been facing opponents who were no match for his advanced technology and genetic enhancements? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he had never truly been tested, never pushed to the limits of his abilities in the way that Maverick was pushing him now. And then there was the human himself. Zorgax had always regarded humans as a primitive, inferior species, barely worthy of his notice. But Maverick was different. He possessed a kind of intelligence and cunning that Zorgax had never encountered before, a way of seeing the world that was utterly alien to the assassin's own experience. The more he studied the ambassador, the more he realized that humans were far more complex and capable than he had ever given them credit for. As the days turned into weeks, Zorgax found himself growing increasingly obsessed with his target. He spent hours poring over every scrap of information he could find about Maverick, trying to understand what made him tick, what drove him to be so infuriatingly elusive. He even began to wonder if there was something more to the ambassador's abilities than mere human ingenuity, some kind of secret weapon or advanced technology that allowed him to stay one step ahead. But deep down, Zorgax knew that this was just a way of avoiding the truth. Maverick was simply better than him, a superior opponent in every way that mattered. And as much as it pained him to admit it, the assassin knew that he had finally met his match, a being who could push him to his limits and beyond. And so, as the hunt dragged on, Zorgax found himself facing a crisis of identity and purpose. He had always defined himself by his ability to kill, to eliminate any target no matter how difficult or dangerous. But now, faced with an opponent who seemed to defy all of his efforts, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to life than just the thrill of the hunt. In the end, he knew that he would have to confront Maverick directly, to face his own doubts and fears head-on. And as he prepared himself for what he knew would be the greatest challenge of his long and bloody career, Zorgax couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation, a thrill that went beyond the mere desire to kill. For he knew that this confrontation would be more than just a battle between assassin and target. It would be a test of everything he had ever believed about himself and his place in the universe, a chance to prove once and for all that he was truly the galaxy's greatest predator. And so, with a sense of grim determination, Zorgax set out to face his destiny, ready to match wits with the elusive ambassador Maverick one last time. The final confrontation came on a clear, moonless night, high atop a towering skyscraper in the heart of New York City. Zorgax had tracked Ambassador Maverick to this location, using every ounce of his skill and cunning to anticipate the human's movements and lay the perfect trap. He knew that this was his last chance, his final opportunity to prove himself against the one being in the galaxy who had managed to elude him for so long. As he stepped out onto the windswept rooftop, his mimetic armor blending seamlessly with the shadows, Zorgax felt a sense of calm descend over him. He had faced countless challenges in his long and bloody career, but none had ever tested him the way that Maverick had. And now, as he prepared himself for the final showdown, he knew that he was ready to face whatever the human had in store. But when Maverick finally appeared, stepping out from behind a gleaming air conditioning unit with a calm, almost casual air, Zorgax found himself hesitating. The ambassador looked different than he had in their previous encounters, his face lined with a weariness and resignation that the assassin had never seen before. And when he spoke, his voice was soft and heavy with a kind of profound sadness. "I know why you're here, Zorgax," he said, his blue eyes locked onto the assassin's own. "And I know that there's nothing I can say or do to change your mind. But before you do what you came here to do, I want you to know something." Zorgax tensed, his hand hovering over the hilt of his plasma blade. But something in Maverick's tone gave him pause, a flicker of curiosity that he couldn't quite suppress. "And what is that, human?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. Maverick sighed, his shoulders slumping as if under a great weight. "I never wanted this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted to be a diplomat, never wanted to be the one who had to try to bridge the gap between our species. But I did it because I believed in something greater than myself, something worth fighting for." Zorgax frowned, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the human's words. "And what is that something?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Maverick looked up, his eyes shining with a fierce, almost desperate intensity. "Peace," he said, his voice ringing out across the rooftop. "A future where humans and aliens can live and work together, not as enemies, but as friends. A future where we can put aside our differences and build something greater than ourselves." Zorgax stared at the human, his mind reeling with the implications of his words. He had never heard anyone speak like this before, never encountered a being who believed in something so deeply, so passionately. And as he listened to Maverick's words, he felt something stirring within him, a flicker of doubt that he had never experienced before. "You really believe that, don't you?" he said, his voice low and incredulous. "You really think that humans and aliens can live together in peace?" Maverick nodded, his face a mask of determination. "I do," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "And I'm willing to fight for it, to do whatever it takes to make that future a reality, even if it means sacrificing my own life." Zorgax stared at the human, his mind racing with 1,000 different thoughts and emotions. He had come here to kill Maverick, to prove once and for all that he was the galaxy's greatest assassin. But now, faced with the human's unwavering conviction and unshakable belief, he found himself questioning everything he had ever known. And in that moment, he made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. He lowered his weapon, his eyes locked onto Maverick's own. "I won't kill you," he said, his voice low and steady. "Not today, not ever. Because I want to believe in that future too, even if I don't know how to get there." Maverick's eyes widened in surprise, his face breaking into a tentative smile. "Then let's find out together," he said, extending his hand towards the assassin. "Let's build that future, one step at a time." And as Zorgax reached out and took the human's hand, he felt a sense of purpose and belonging that he had never known before. He had finally found something worth fighting for, something greater than himself. And he knew that, whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with Maverick by his side, united in their quest for a better tomorrow.